I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. In our time where we're taping this, Steve, we're always about at least a week behind when this actually drops on all the podcatchers. Yesterday, our time, our friend Scott L. passed away. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on Scott L. He went to our Monday night meeting, a very quiet guy. Scott was somebody who went with his wife, who was also in the program, and he was sober. What was he sober? 5, 6 years?
Yep. 5 years. Just had 5 years this past December.
Now, he was in the program longer than 5 years. When he came in, his wife kind of grabbed him by the lifeguard hold to drag him in and drag him in again and again and again. And this was the type of guy who walks into AA, who is sober for a little bit of time, maybe days, maybe weeks, and then goes out. And he was, as my mother would say, in and out like a fiddler's elbow. Went to our Joe and Charlie meetings sometimes where I could smell the booze on his breath. And I'm not usually pretty good at smelling that stuff or seeing it, but I picked it up. And for whatever reason, it finally clicked for him. And he got sober. And he passed away of lung cancer. He was sick for about a year, about 2 years. And you kind of knew this was going to happen, and it finally did. And the topic I have around this is dying sober. And I can't think of a more ultimate goal if you get into recovery than to kind of reach the finish line sober and get your obituary where it said he died sober. And this is something that I picked up on very early in recovery. Frank C. talked about that of, so-and-so. There was this guy at a Tuesday night meeting who asked Frank C. to be his sponsor. And this guy was very old, much older than Frank. And Frank was older. And he had more sobriety than Frank. And Frank had like 30-something years of sobriety, but he asked Frank to be his sponsor. And Frank had mentioned that he would have been very happy to see the obituary that said he died sober. Like, that's the ultimate compliment if you are an alcoholic in recovery. And it made me think about that. Yeah, it's one day at a time, but for me, I'm kind of goal setting to have that obit to say he died sober at the end. I almost feel like that's the win, that I get to the finish line and I've made it. Somewhat dark, but I think it's kind of the end result. And how do we get there? How do we get there from one day at a time to I want this to be the rest of my life?
Matt, when we talked about this, when we were texting back and forth and this topic was sort of kicked around, I said, it could be a dark topic, but it is the goal. It's the goal for me. I know that. And I don't think about it as the goal. I don't think about how I get there, because I truly believe that we work a day at a time program. I always like to say, if you want to see how my program's going, the best person to check with is my wife.
Yep.
And she'll tell you how my program's going. And I mean that honestly, and I chuckle when I say it, but I mean that honestly, because I always say, my wife doesn't care how many years I have sober. If I'm being a jerk today, then I'm being a jerk today. But it made me think, right? When I got the news that Scott had passed, it made me think about it, right? And I do think about Scott struggled to get in here, as we know, and I was happy to see him get in here, and I was happy to see him get it. And you're right, he was a quiet guy, didn't share much, but he had a lot of gratitude for this program. And I talked to him as he was sick, and one of the things he had said to me that was he went through this whole process was, I know that drinking is not going to make anything better. Right. And it's nice because it's easy to think that, when we get down, we'll just say, fuck it. Let me just ease the pain, ease the mental anxiety, ease the pain and go out that way. And I'm sure there are people who do it. But we don't have to do it. You know, if anybody has seen the movie, My Name is Bill, right? Or I think it was that one. There's a couple of different ones out. There was one out when I first came back. It was a documentary. And there's a story out there that on Bill's deathbed, he was asking for a drink.
I heard this story.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting. And the point of that whole story is that we're all human, right? We all go through all this kind of stuff. But, and who knows if he was in the right state of mind at that point? Who knows what was going on? I don't know. But that is out there, that on his deathbed, he was asking for a drink.
That would have been disastrous for the program.
Oh, it would have been.
Even if it was an hour before he died, it would be disastrous.
Oh, my God. It would be. So the question is, how do we get there? Is it a goal? What do you do? And again, I do think that the way I get there is by certainly doing things like this, doing this podcast with you every night, you know, every week. I mean, showing up to do it, you know, even if we got other stuff going on. You know, we've had times where we've had mixed up schedules, so we move it. You know, we move it to a Thursday. We usually tape on a Tuesday right now. It used to be a Wednesday. Now we're doing Joe and Charlie on a Wednesday, so we move it to Tuesday. We've done it on a Sunday. You know, you did your interview with Bill on a Sunday. So anyway, so the question is, how do we get there? And is it something that we should strive for? And I think it is.
I think so, because there's something inspiring to me when you see that obit that he died sober. To me, it's the message of it works.
Right.
And if I look at somebody like Scott, so you don't know Scott. You haven't met Scott. But if you did know Scott, to hear Scott say, drinking is not going to make my situation better, the situation he is in, that is incredible progress over a 5-year period of time.
Yeah, I agree.
5 years is a long time for anybody. But for Scott to get to 5 years and to think that way is a miracle, because he was almost an impossible case.
Yeah.
And I find the impossible case is the most inspiring. That those impossible cases like Scott's, where they get it and they're involved and they're bought in and they want it and enjoy their new way of life, to me, it's much more inspiring than I see a newcomer come in who just immediately gets it.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get it. Somebody like Scott is not supposed to. And I'm sure we all know people, if you're in a 12-step group, of those people who are in and out, in and out, in and out, sometimes for years, and then they finally get it.
Yeah.
And they're the best members of the group.
I agree. And I don't, and it's one of the things is we always talk about this program, how, and I know plenty of guys who have been in and out, right? I know plenty of guys. And I know it's hard for some people to come back. I used to go to a meeting in a town, the next town over, and actually, no, that's not even true. Now I think about it. It was the Monday night meeting. There was a woman came in, and she had a lot of trouble staying sober. She was a younger woman. She was probably in her 30s, and she constantly would go up and get a 24-hour chip. And I liked seeing her. I liked every time she went up there, I was proud of her. And I was proud of her because she had the courage to keep going to get 24-hour chips. Because I know plenty of people who have gone out and they stopped taking the 24-hour chip because they're embarrassed, because they've done it, because of, you know, whatever the reasoning. And I've walked up to this woman several times and said, I'm so proud of you that you keep coming back. Because you're right, they're very inspiring. And I saw her during the pandemic, and I still see her today. When I see her today, I don't see her. I probably haven't seen her for a couple years now. Maybe not quite long, but maybe something like that. A year and a half at least. And when I see her, we still smile. We'll give each other a hug, and I'll ask her how she's doing because I've connected with her because of that. And I am inspired by her. And the last time I knew, she had put together some time, you know, over a year. And I was so proud of her then because it's not easy, you know. I said it last night at our meeting. It's a simple program, but getting sober is not easy for real alcoholics.
Yeah, that's the line I picked up for the first time. I like that phrase, simple but not easy. And for whatever reason, I had it highlighted, and for whatever reason, it hit me last night reading Bill's story, that just was connecting with me last night. And I use it a lot in work. Here's a lot with people when I'm trying to coach them. Yeah, it's simple. They don't do it, so it's not easy.
Right. Yeah. And I do believe that, right? I mean, there's nothing easy there, especially early on. There was nothing easy about me getting sober. It seems easy to me now because there's a lot of things I do out of habit. You know, the old thing, if you do something, whatever it is, 10,000 times, right, it becomes a habit. And now I have habits that keep me sober, and I do them. I do them all the time. Again, I come back to, I do this podcast. This podcast is a habit for me. I know that on Tuesday nights we're going to sit down and do it unless we've made arrangements. Not. It's a habit for me. My Monday night meeting is a habit. My Friday night meeting is a habit. So those are the things, you know, talking to other alcoholics are habits for me, you know. So I know those things I'm going to do today, and they're easier for me today than they were when I first came in. But when I first came in, it was not easy. I was not happy to be here, you know. Like people always say, we don't come in here because we're happy and joyful, right? We come in here because we're beaten down, and that we have nowhere else to turn.
There's no other option,
right? There's no other option, you know. So
I'll tell you what was hard with me. It wasn't that stuff. It was being ashamed. It was going. I don't even know if I can articulate it now, but I did not want to go into that first AA meeting. Nor did I want to go into the first few until I understood what it was, because walking into an AA meeting, I still felt like an outsider at first. Regardless of my problem, I'm an outsider, I'm not like you, and you're all going to look at me and think you have a problem. And that was terrifying. Yet, that terror and that discomfort was not enough to prevent me from walking in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was better to go into that experience and overcome that discomfort. Second time I went to the Thursday night men's meeting, I went in the wrong entrance where the church had about 20 events going. And like I walked through the basketball court,
right.
I heard people rustling. So I walked into a room. That must be it. No, it was a Boy Scout meeting. And I just walked away without saying, because what I'm saying, do you know where the AA meeting is?
Right.
You have this weirdo alcoholic who's walking in with the boys.
Right.
They're going to call the cops on me.
Walking into the Boy Scout meeting.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you're like me, all right? Just listen to your story. But I walked into my first meeting by myself, right? Like, you know, nobody went with me, right? Sometimes somebody goes with you. If you reach out for help to somebody who maybe you know had a problem, and maybe your first meeting you walk in with somebody, makes it a little bit easier. And the truth is, if you have that option, I would tell you that's the way to do it.
Absolutely.
If you have that option and you know somebody who may be in recovery, the way to do it may be to reach out to somebody and ask for some help and some advice, and then you walk into a meeting with someone that you're at least familiar with and maybe could show you the ropes. I didn't have that either. I walked into my own meeting because I needed to, and then more or less I was told to. I was told to by other people that I had a problem and I needed to fix it. I didn't walk in willingly. I walked in because I had to. And it's very strange. It's very strange to walk into a room where most people know each other. Most meetings you go to, most people in that meeting will know each other somewhat, and they have some type of relationship, and you're the brand new guy. And most meetings welcome you well, right? Like the meetings we go to, which is why I think we go to them, they'll welcome you. They'll make sure they'll talk to you. I don't remember that happening. Maybe it did because I was in a pretty big fog. Maybe people reached out to me and I don't remember it, but I don't remember it like I see it happening today in the meetings we go to. But it's a scary thing. It can be a scary thing. So if, again, I would just reiterate, if you can, find somebody to go with, and it'll be helpful. So,
and I think getting back to dying in sobriety, seeing in that obit and thinking about what somebody did to get there. If I think about Frank C., who didn't have 5 years, he had probably close to 40 years.
Yeah.
35, 40 years. And you think through after somebody passes and they die sober, think about the lives that somebody who died sober has touched. So if we think about Frank C. probably sponsored half of Central Connecticut. If you live in Central Connecticut, you probably know who Frank C. was, because he was involved in everything, especially early on. Not as he got older. he was more frail, as most people do when they get older. But if you're sober 35, 40 years and you get involved in service and you take speaking commitments and you sponsor people and you go to a lot of meetings, he went to a lot of meetings and he went to the same meetings over and over again, which I could never, I couldn't go to the same meeting for 18 years. I'd get bored. He did. He just never deviated. Like, it was almost superstitious that he had to go to the same meetings for 30 years until the meetings, disbanded, and then he'd find a new meeting. But that was the only reason. And you get to know people and you sponsor people. And even if you just say hello, there are those little instances where you make a connection with somebody and the spider webs connect down to other people. And you have that impact on people where you may have turned their life around. Even in 5 years, Scott made an impact on me. One, because he stayed sober and he was involved. And just because Scott was quiet doesn't mean he didn't have something to say, doesn't mean he didn't have a presence.
Matt, I think it's even deeper than that, because I knew Scott quite well as probably anybody in the program. And the impact he had was on his own family, right? Was on his sons, right? Because before he came in, like you said, he was struggling, and right before he came in, he was in a really, really bad spot. And he's got a couple boys, and they one of them, I think one of them has children. I think maybe they both do at this point. And he's been able to impact that group of people, the people closest to him, the people that loved him the most, right? And the beauty is that they were able to be with him and around him and see him and love him in a way that wouldn't have been possible if he never found sobriety and didn't keep sobriety. And that's part of what drives me. This past weekend was Easter weekend for those who celebrate Easter. We were lucky enough to have people come to our house, my 2 kids and one of my wife's 2 children. And within that group, there's 4 grandchildren. And we have them all up. And it's we do this thing that the grandkids started at their house. It's called Thorn and Rose. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but at dinner time, you give a thorn for your day, something you didn't like to happen in your day, and you give a rose, something that you like, the best thing that happened in your day. So every time we sit down to eat, we do Thorn and Rose, and it's usually led by one of the grandkids. And so when we did our Easter celebration on Saturday, because that's what worked for us, and most of the adults said that their rose was that we were all together, right? We're all together. I'm just telling you, if I'm drinking, nobody's coming to my house for Easter.
No.
Right? Nobody is coming. They don't want to be here.
There was a lot of, at the Easter I went to, the thorn is I was there, the rose was I got to leave.
You text me during that Easter.
It was 74 degrees in the house with the 74 degrees with the heat on. All types of politics, including our senator being laughed at for breaking his leg in a parade. I whipped my head up. I'm like, you're saying it's good that a 77-year-old man fell and broke his leg?
Right.
Regardless of whether you agree with his politics or not. A 77-year-old man broke his leg. Stop it. And I got the whole, well, I vote for the person. And I'm just like, oh, so what you're saying is I'm an ass and I don't vote for the person. And it was just like one of those, oh, please stop talking about this.
But really, that is it. Like I said, so that's the beauty of what I saw with Scott, is that he got that family back. I mean, I don't know. I know there was a problem when he was drinking. I do know that. Like there is with anybody. There was a problem with me. It's not that I had no relationship with my kids when I was drinking. Of course I had a relationship with them because I was able to temper my drinking. If I knew my kids were coming over, I could sort of play that card and not, but I just wasn't fun to be around. And so that's what drives me is the fact that, I'm able to have those events, One of the things I did was I was able to find a Playscape sort of swing set for free on one of these Facebook groups, and I wanted to get it up for Easter because I knew everybody was coming. And we had good enough weather that the kids were able to be outside, and I spent a lot of time sort of prepping this thing and getting it ready to go up, and got it up a couple of weeks ago. And just to watch them all play on it was like, okay, it was worth it. Spent a lot of hours, you know?
That's what I think changes is maybe it's an empathy piece. I enjoy days like Easter because of the other people enjoying it.
Yeah, me too.
Seeing it through my kids' eyes. I'm not thinking about what I'm getting.
No.
And you mentioned, you could pull it together for a few hours, but it wasn't real.
No.
You were acting during that time. In reality, when you're sober and the difference between dry, that you've addressed your issues so that you don't have to drink to solve your problems. You can be real. You can be vulnerable. Even if it means you're quiet. Maybe you don't say much. Maybe you're boring. Maybe you say a lot, but you're the real person there so that you can have real conversations. And also you have that filter where you don't have to jump in like when everybody was acting like an ass and jump in to yell at people. And I'm like, I'm going to go in the other room. I can't believe this conversation's being had.
Yeah, because if I was having those type of events and I was trying to do it in a non-drinking manner, certainly if I was drinking, I wasn't sober, whether I had alcohol in me or not. It just, the problem would be I would be anxious, right? Because I wasn't in my comfort zone, right? I didn't have what I needed to get through that day at that time. And I'd be anxious that I needed the event to end so I could go do what I needed to do, right? I mean, that's what would happen to me. So, I'm just thinking about that. I'm just so happy I don't have to live that way today. I really am. I'm just so happy that, the worst thing is like when I have this going on, I do a lot of the work. I do most of the cooking. I do a lot with the kids, and I'm exhausted by the end of the day. I'm tired.
I was exhausted.
Yeah, I'm tired.
We went over somebody's house, and I can hide behind the cooking.
Yeah.
I don't have to go and talk to certain people. I'm doing the cooking. I'm busy. But it allows me the opportunity to also be me. If I'm anxious, which I often am going to these type of events, I can look and say, I'm anxious doing this, but it's okay. Everything will be fine. I will get through this. And I don't even think usually I have to down about 6 Coke Zeros, and I was drinking water and had what I had, and I got through it.
Yeah.
There were some moments, but you get through those moments and it's fine. And those are the experiences that you have. You decide to get sober, you kind of change your life, and maybe you don't get back everything, but you're more pleasant to, even just as a victor of being more pleasant to be around. Yeah. And I think you kind of become the real you. I have this, I always question whether evil exists. I think it does in some cases. But I think a lot of times people behave in evil ways because something else is going on. Fears.
Yeah.
Unaddressed things. Like with alcoholics, a lot of times, they're not bad people. Let me amend that. I find the people that I know some people who are having zero success getting sober, and some of those people are just pure evil. Yeah. I think the people who are good and the bad stuff comes out because they're drinking, that layer comes off and you get to see who they really are.
Yeah, I think we can all be led astray. Again, typically for most of us who are drinking, we're in a lot of pain, some type of pain, right? Emotional pain, could be physical pain, but emotional pain, some type of trauma maybe. So, you look at any animal, right? Any animal that's in pain. You ever try to, you see these things. You try to go help a dog that's in pain. The dog's aggressive. The dog's not mean. The dog is just in pain.
Yep.
Or the dog's frightened, right? Fear is, for me, another type of pain, right? Your dog is fearful. Once the dog starts to trust you, or the cat tries to start, I've talked about it. We just took in a cat a few months ago. When we brought this cat in, this cat did nothing but hiss at us, right? Nothing. Like, get away from me. I don't want to hear it, And now she's fine. But so it's all of those things. So that pain causes us to do a lot of things and causes us to act in a way that typically we wouldn't act, many of us. I know it did for me. But I do believe there is just pure evil out there, right? And again, I don't, won't get into any of the other stuff, but I think there are people who are evil people. and they look to do evil things. I don't think there's a lot of them, right? I don't buy into this fact that you got to worry all about it. I've always told my kids when they were young that if you're in trouble, that almost any adult you go up and ask for help is going to help you, right? Like don't get this fear that all adults are bad. Like they're the ones that are probably going to help you. So I believe that most people are good, and that most people will do what's right. But again, so we talk about, the topic of how to, dying sober. Is it a goal? Should it be a goal? And then you talk about what we just talked about, the holidays, the day-to-day stuff, the families that we impact, right? My family, my kids, my grandkids, right? Had a beautiful kid. We have 6. Had a beautiful picture of 4 of them. So the 4 of them now are 2 months to 9 years old, right? Still quite young. But a picture of the 4 of them all together. And it's, to me, I just look at it and they're all smiling. Obviously, the 2-month-old isn't smiling. But he had his eyes open. And it's just like, I look at that picture and it's like, that means everything to me. Like that
Right.
picture right there just means everything to me. And none of that's available to me, right? And they're 2 months and they're 9 and they're, God willing, there's lots of good things to happen as they get older. There's high school graduations and colleges and hopefully marriages and more babies. And hopefully I live a long enough life to see some of those things. And none of those things are available to me if I'm not sober. If I'm not sober.
Well, those things might happen. You won't be part of it.
You're right. They're not available to me. Absolutely. They're available to them and everybody else, but they wouldn't be available to me unless I'm sober.
I don't think it's a case of, if you have that goal of dying sober, it's aspirational. Almost like I look at it like I look at business. All right, I have a metric that I want to achieve. I want to die sober. Okay, so what are the critical operating tasks to get there? I got to string some days at a time. If I want to die sober, I'm going to think about getting through this today. And what do I want to learn today that's going to help me stay sober? I want to learn a little bit more and sharpen another tool so that when things go bad, I know how to deal with it. I thought early on, because I kept hearing all these people say 5 years, everything fell apart. And I'm like, all right, I'm not preparing for things to fall apart at 5 years. But if it does, I want to be ready now.
Right.
So I've got some work to do right now, and I'm going to put the hard work in early on so that if I get to that point when the unexpected happens, a black swan event in my life, I have the tools to get through it so I don't have to drink. And I think I've gotten through a bunch of those.
Yeah, I don't find them to be black swan events. And again, and I'm going to tell you something, that happened to me. It wasn't 5 years, but it was like 6, 7 years that I started thinking differently about my sobriety, put it that way. And I think those things happen for many of us very slowly and a little bit at a time. I always say it's like the frog in the pot of water, right? You put a frog in a pot of water and you heat it up slowly. He doesn't know he's being cooked alive. And it's the same thing that happens, I think, to some of us. It happened to me. And I know it's happened to other people because I know some people, and we talk about it all the time, is that things start to change slowly. And then pretty soon you know it, or you don't know it, and you just think totally different about your sobriety. And it's good, right? I mean, you got some lessons early on, and you were aware of it. I wasn't aware of that, right? And I didn't have that thought like, oh, I got to pay attention around that 5-year itch or 6 or 7-year itch, if you would call it that. But those are the things you got to do. You got to be prepared, right?
I'm constantly thinking of it.
Right. One of the things we say is the Friday night meeting all the time is, be prepared for the unexpected, right? How do you get through the unexpected turmoil? And those are the ones that catch us off guard. But there's tools. We have them. They're available for you. If you're out here listening, if you're new, Monday night was nice, right? We had 3 guys who were fairly new. A couple of the guys came up and one guy took a 24-hour chip and the other guy took a month chip. So we were talking about that. Like those are the guys we'd love to see. Love to see those guys. They really make a meeting. Love to see them. Hopefully they come back. I told them that they could show up Friday, that we have the meeting in the same church. I hope they'll show up. Hope they'll take that next step and show up again.
I love seeing how raw it is for them, that they're shaking and baking is the only way to describe it.
Absolutely.
That you see the newness in their eyes and the discomfort. And I like seeing it. It reminds me, and it puts me on my best behavior. It makes me behave better. I was chairing the meeting. I sure as hell was going to say something a little bit different because I knew I had a different audience.
Right.
Let me teach these people something so that they want to come back.
Right.
So that they feel, and it's important for me, any meeting I go to where there's new people, I want them to feel super, super included and warm and very welcome.
Yeah, me too.
That's what I would want for me.
Yep. Absolutely. I definitely want them. I'll go out of my way to make sure they feel that way. I go out of my way to make sure that they know I want them to come back. Yeah, and get to know them and watch them go. There's nothing better than watching somebody come in shaking and baking and then see them around for the next couple of years and watch them grow, right? And turn into a useful member of not only the group or an AA, but of society, of their family. Like we know plenty of those stories, right? We've seen them, and we're talking about one of those stories tonight, right? And our buddy Scott. And it's something that I could strive to be, and it's something that I've learned. Being around him just taught me some of those things. Like don't give up. Just remind me of those things. Don't give up. Don't give up until the old saying. Don't give up until the miracle happens. Right?
No, the miracle happened in this case,
yeah.
And it was a privilege to get to see Scott get sober, both withdrawing from the drink and mentally, and getting to the point where he was so sick and knew he was going to die, yet would be able to turn around and say, not thinking of a drink, that's not going to fix my situation. And that is not the Scott before he got sober. I promise.
Yep. And I had the privilege to spend some time with him during this process. And these weren't just words. I mean, he believed these words. He lived them. I was really proud of him. I was really happy to call him my friend.
He was quiet, but what he said was true.
Right.
Man, a few words, and when he did say something, he meant it.
Yeah. So
that's what I found.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, we would love for you to give a review like Coming At You did on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars. The title is Mere Christianity. Thank you guys for dedicating time to recovery. You've broadened my recovery thoughts through the dynamic discussions. After the last episode on the faith, I thought I'd pass on the book title and author that has helped me guide me on my spiritual journey, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. So he must have been talking about the horse dying and the hard time I had and our talk about afterlife and stuff. And I love that review because that gives me some feedback that, hey, somebody got engaged on that.
Really nice.
So if you give a review, I'll read it. We love having that feedback from the audience. And if you like the podcast, share it with somebody. Share it with somebody else. Share it on social media. We're looking to get this into the ear of the newcomer so that people can find out that recovery is possible and that maybe you can be somebody like Scott, be hard-headed, and finally get it and make an impact where you never thought you could before. Thanks, Steve, for coming on and talking a little bit of Scott and a little bit of the end game that we have.
Sure enough, Matt. Always good to be with you.
And we'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.